state to block voter restriction laws there, jumpstart voting rights legislation in Washington, D.C. simply by being there? That's the question this hour as Jim Clyburn wages a lonely public battle against the filibuster in cases of voting rights.
We all know that the filibuster is not in the Constitution. It's not a law. It's a tradition. And traditions means a past. In order for us to look to the future, we must begin to look at what is necessary for this great country to continue its movement towards perfection. The filibuster, I think, has its place, but not when it comes to voting and other constitutional issues.
Now, President Biden's address yesterday on democracy and voting rights was also designed to move the needle in terms of public opinion on the urgent need for voting rights legislation. That's according to one senior White House official who told me the topic doesn't show up in most polls of Americans' concerns yet. Here's a part of the case the president made to the American people.
The 21st century Jim Crow assault is real. It's unrelenting. And we're going to challenge it vigorously. It's no longer just about who gets to vote or making it easier for eligible voters to vote. It's about who gets to count the vote. Who gets to count whether or not your vote counted at all.
Now, notably, Texas Democrats, who are at the smack dab in the middle of this fight right now, aren't calling for a sweeping and potentially polarizing piece of legislation. On this program, in this hour yesterday, Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett said she'd take anything that shielded voters from restrictions.
What most people don't realize is that if we got just an inch, that would protect us in Texas. Texas is the hardest state to vote in as it is. So we need some kind of oversight. We need just something. We don't necessarily need everything that's in H.R. 1. We would love to have it. But if we don't get anything, I don't know what's going to happen to our democracy.
Now, the Texas Democrats' escape to the nation's capital at this moment is the kind of plot twist that just might revive an issue that many Democrats privately and increasingly publicly view as hopeless. Washington Post describes it this way, quote, a riveting exodus from Texas as dozens of Democratic lawmakers said goodbye to young children and aging parents, made arrangements to leave their homes and their jobs potentially for weeks, and drew sharp rebukes for walking away from their responsibilities in the Texas legislature. Post goes on, quote, they said they had no other recourse, and they admitted that they have no endgame, as Abbott promised to keep calling special sessions over and over until the election legislation has its day. But they chose Washington, a hideout in full view for a reason, to garner national attention and escalate the stakes in a long-running effort to pressure Congress and President Biden to approve federal voting rights protections that would outlaw the kinds of restrictions Texas Republicans and dozens of other legislatures across the country are trying to enact. The members met with Vice President Harris yesterday and plan to continue to lobby for federal legislation this week in meetings with a slate of Democratic senators, including one with Joe Manchin tomorrow. And anyone who tuned into the All-Star game last night might have noticed that the All-Star game took place in Colorado. Well, that was not supposed to be the case. The game was supposed to be played in Atlanta, but was moved after Georgia passed voting restrictions in an appeal to the ex-president and his supporters, even after 3 audits proved that there was no fraud in Georgia. Today, corporations are stepping back into the fray. More than 150 companies, including Pepsi, Macy's, IKEA, and Nestle, signed on to a letter supporting the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. That letter, obtained by NBC News, says this, quote, despite decades of progress, impediments to exercising the right to vote persist in many states, especially for communities of color. We need federal protections to safeguard this fundamental right for all Americans.